We're going to move on now. We've got the panel. I'm going to hand you over to somebody that I've actually interviewed on the podcast, Dino. Great guy and wealth of knowledge. He's from Falcon, director of global events, and they have actually brought along Coca-Cola social media marketer, Kravitz, head of growth and marketing, and Viacom senior social media manager. So I'm going to leave Dino to introduce you to the panel. I'll be taking your questions, so make sure you drop them in the...
Certainly. Are we live on air?
You are indeed, my friend.
All right. We were in the middle of syncing with the AV team, so apologies for that. You're catching us red-handed, if you will, but 2020 has been nothing but improvise in the moment, slap it off, shake it off, whatever you want to say. So here we are. Let's do it. A little earlier than expected, but welcome everybody to today's panel. Does brand activism win over brand neutrality? My name is Dino Kukovic, Director of Community Events at Falcon.io, a social media platform with roots in Denmark. We're one of the sponsors here today, and honestly, I really want to say thank you to the organizers, most primarily for the very reasons I just mentioned in the intro. A was great. Plan B made us stronger. Everybody probably on this panel here today had to rip up existing playbooks and perhaps improvise. That seems to be the trend of 20 millions. Yes, so big thank you to the organizers, which I kind of put on this cheesy little slide here. Exactly. So start with the agenda for today, before we introduce the lovely faces joining me here today. We have all had to navigate through some rough waters at one point in our professional life, and how to handle a crisis, or whether or not to actually take a stance or support a movement as a brand. But I want to take a step back here. Humor me for a second. Once upon a time in the dark ages of the 80s and the 90s, it used to actually be pretty uncool to care too much. And after the world has collectively spent about 10 years on social media, all that has drastically changed, marketing not being an exception. So the question we are going to tackle today is, how can brands market well to the generation literally equipped with the most sophisticated, excuse the French, but bullshit detector in the history of mankind? And should they, or is it smarter business decision to actually remain neutral? So just so we're all on the stage, I want to start with how we want to, or how the experts in the industry define brand activism. And it consists of business efforts to promote, impede, or direct social, political, economic and or environmental reform or stasis with the desire to promote or impede improvements in society. So here it is, actually, as defined by Kotler and Sarkar. You can be on both sides of this coin, but ultimately activism is about action, not just words, and brands can act through public relations strategies, corporate social responsibility, government relations, and here we are today, marketing techniques to make real, long-lasting change. And honestly, guys, nobody knows this better than my wonderful set of panelists, experts in the realm. So perhaps we could just go in this order. Ladies first, of course, with quick little introduction. Welcome, Bianca, Ish, and Boris. So Bianca, over to you for a quick intro.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Bianca Key. I'm the Senior Social Media Manager at VH1, and I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice to be with you. Ish, over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ish Verduzco. I'm calling from Los Angeles, so it's a little early. I don't know where you all are in the world. I am leading up growth and marketing at a small social and food startup called Kravitz. And previously, I was working at Snapchat on their diversity team. So this conversation is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited.
Nice. That sounds like the qualification to discuss here. Nice. Welcome, Ish. And last but not least, Boris.
Hello from me also for everybody. I'm Boris from Coca-Cola, working as digital visioneer in digital department of Coca-Cola from Serbia, but temporary in Montenegro on my vacation. But I'm glad that I'm here with you guys, and thank you, Dino, for invitation.
Of course, wonderful. So I think we're covering the time zones, we're covering the expertise. I say let's just start. You guys ready?
Of course.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Cool. So, because we really want to prioritize your questions, I'm going to dive right in. So 55% of consumers believe that brands have a more important role than our governments, actually, to create a better future. Do you guys think that, or do you typically look for brands or government for guidance on these societal issues? Why or why not? So maybe we could start with Bianca in this case.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important if we're for societal issues. Personally, I'm looking to the news to just get the facts. At the end of the day, I want to know the facts before I look to brands to see what. And I think from a brand or a marketing perspective, it's really important if we do want to inform our audience that we're informing them with straight facts. So I try to go to news publications or media outlets, and then I try to fact check that. Once I do that, then I'm looking to brands to see what they're doing. Because I think it's really important that if we're putting our dollars into these brands, that these brands also align with our views and our perspectives. And if they say that they support Black culture or they support Black Lives Matter movement,
Right.
that they're actually doing something about it, stand up and educate and provide resources to their community, and they're being vocal about it on their social media handles. It's one thing to just say it, but it's another thing to do it. So I think it's kind of a fine, a balance between the two of, providing informative resources, whether it be from the news or, and then also backing that up with, what these brands are doing to see, what they're sharing with their audience. So I think it's kind of like a 50-50 mix.
Nice. Boris, second question is for you. Should all brands be brand activists today, or is there room to remain apolitical, as I'm calling it? What are the potential consequences for choosing either route? I know that's a loaded question that can probably be a webinar on its own, but I'd love your opinion.
So, but if you decide to go into activism, there won't be an easy way out. Consumers are willing to appreciate your activities, but also you can pay a huge price if you fail their expectations. So it's very important to make a long-term strategy to address the key points. For example, you must define what is your brand purpose. If you don't have it, think about it, define it, ask your loyal consumers what is their perception. Purpose is much more than a brand promise. A brand promise may give you to give a buyer an idea of what to expect from a product or service, but the brand purpose goes way beyond that. A brand purpose connects with consumers on a more emotional level. Likewise, brand purpose is the same as social purpose, but there are some similarities. To clarify this, a brand purpose is about product-led initiatives which strive to achieve a business and benefit society on a long term. So the next step is to investigate where and how you can help to the society. Is it very important to find the proper issue on which you can react? Research, and again research, and of course listen. When you have all the facts and feedbacks, you need to find a creative way to help and present a solution. Do a focus group, use all assets which you have, engaged in conversation with your partners. They can help a lot. And the third thing, not the also important thing, what kind of impact your activity will have on your brand. If you don't want to lose consumers, because if you lose them you will lose money. If you lose money, that means your strategy will collapse and was not properly set in the first place. What does it mean? For example, we can say that Balkan countries are homophobic. And if you want to help LGBT population, support them, you cannot go directly against the majority and punch them into the face and shouting via all your communication channels. You will lose trust, brand love, of course, and sales will go down. But still, if you're willing to help, you need long-term strategy to work with NGO sector, fund the projects, and find a way to educate people first, and then you can take that kind of position. Also, if you choose that your brand will be activist or you're already done a lot of things, consumers will expect from you to go further. And I think that is a good sign. That's mean that you're going in the right direction. And when you see that consumers recognize and respond to your efforts. On another hand, if you choose to stay totally apolitical, you are risking that your competitors will eat you alive. And don't forget, it's very important to keep in mind that the main goal is to make a positive impact, not necessarily just to earn money. Only if you have that open of mindset and you are honestly speaking with your consumers, they will respect your moves even they personally disagree.
Right. So preparing for discomfort is what I'm hearing as one of the potential consequences we obviously all have to be ready for when you take a stance. So Ish, I'm actually curious if we actually use this to piggyback. My question to you is, are marketers equipped with the right skills to engage in brand activism? And that starts with perhaps internal conversations before we hit the publish button and say, okay, we support fill in the blank. What's your stance on this? Sorry, Ish, did you hear me? Are we having CNN
most
style?
companies probably not well equipped. I think
Here we go.
even companies.
Go ahead.
Can you guys? Companies even with like the strongest DEI foundation might be, and DEI meaning diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
But these are like huge societal and global issues requiring support from the entire company. So I think what companies can do to support is put a diversity, equity, and inclusion team in play, or at least a person to lead up that strategy, and ensure that the marketers that are pushing forward these strategies on a day-to-day basis and on the social channels and digital channels have open communication on a regular basis with that team or with that person, because you don't hire like marketers to have a global DEI strategy. Like, these are people that have done this for years and years and years, just that one thing. But having those people to like rely on, and inclusion trainings and other things that can support them, whether that's materials or webinars. But there needs to be a constant communication all the time for these marketers to be like well equipped. But I don't think it's fair to ask for the marketers to have the skills or the resources right off the bat just from being hired.
Yeah. Also because, the community is out there, not to say, what was that? I'm sorry?
Nothing. That was it.
Okay, cool. I mean, New York and LA have always been a little, unsynced, but I think this time it's about the internet connection. So apologies the lag. But what I wanted to say, when it comes to preparation, I think a lot of the times with brand activism, it's in the moment, and not to say or paint a picture that, I don't know, brand X doesn't care, but ultimately it's too often, I'd want to say, a retrospective reaction than a proactive discovery and handling of a crisis or of support. So I love what you said, and I honestly do think that if we all take a step back, have these internal conversations, and perhaps run a crisis management or a brand support CSR management audit, and in the back end, that will probably help out quite a lot. So Bianca, the next question is for you. How does a brand actually prepare for and work on the first steps towards activism? You're coming from a company who is obviously no stranger to a lot of us when you look at the sub-brands that are under the Viacom pillar. So I'm sure you guys have a lot of regulation, a lot of rules to follow. So what were your first steps, and what would you recommend marketers listening in and trying to get something out there do?
Yeah, similar to what Ish was saying, sort of expert on your team that is familiar and comfortable, that can do the research for you. I think it's really important that you're tapping or that team. So speaking from experience, one, we're able to with our social impact team, and there are who comes to anything, nonprofit or societal issues, anything that we want to speak in, for example, like the Black Lives Matter movement. We've been more vocal across our social platforms to stand in solidarity and to ensure that, we're not reading or pushing resources out that are just in the ether. We tap into our internal or social impact and ensure we need steps to make. We know which resources to, because you guys have heard and of resources and Google Docs that have been shared to the internet, but not orgs or this is they're not all official. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we're facing. So for us, we lean on our experts. Obviously, we can do our due diligence from a social, from a marketer perspective, but it's really important collaborative to ensure that when you are informing the audience, you're doing so from a full sort of 60 perspective, and it's not just, oh, we're pushing out this org, supporting this org because we're familiar. We that we're pointing them in the right direction that uplifts and highlights. It's at the end. That's the first step to do. Just rely on internal team, the knowledge, or tap into that person that's the expertise to ensure that you get to push out that post, that you are in research, you already vetted the org, you already vetted the copy, and you're good, so you don't worry about any consequences after you push out that tweet. So I think that's the first that most, if not all orgs need to be taking, tap into the experts.
Yeah, I agree. But, one of the head-scratching moments that probably all of us should reflect on and think about before we go live with support, or perhaps not support, is the potential, flagging that we're doing something inauthentically, or just trying to cash in on a trending hashtag or cause because it's the trend of the Tuesday, or just popular on a Wednesday. So how can a brand speak out on a cause without being flagged or labeled as inauthentic, in your opinion, Bianca?
In my opinion, like I said, I think you need to do your research. I think you need to tap into that expertise. You need to tell them what's going on, whether it's the social impact team, that one expert that you have on the team. You need to let them know, like, hey, this is what we're seeing on social. This is what our audience is talking about. How do we align authentically? And I think, to your point, Dino, earlier, you said we're in a digital age right now, is more than happy to call us out on our bullshit. And I think now more than ever, like you said, it's so important to be proactive versus reactive, because at the point that you're being reactive, people are going to call you out. They're going to tell you it feels inauthentic, that it doesn't align. And I think at the end of the day, it's a fine balance between relying on the experts and then also relying on the team that's at the forefront of whatever you're pushing out. So if it's a tweet, or if it's a LinkedIn post or a Facebook post, you need to make sure that you have the social team in the room, and you need to make sure that you have the social impact team. So both parties are able to join in and come up with a really robust strategy to ensure that when you do push it out on social, that 5 minutes later your audience isn't dragging you because they're like, this does not sound like our brand. So I think it's definitely a balance.
And then back to Ish's point, this message also needs to be distributed across the entire org, not necessarily in the same amount of detail, but everybody should know and feel equipped, from the person on the customer support track to the customer success manager to the account managers to sales. If confronted, I'm at least ready, or feel ready, to answer that question as to why it is we're silent, as to why it is we're supporting. Uber last week, or as I believe it was last week, had a very clear statement when it comes to Black Lives Matter. And I think that's a perfect example, a recent example, rather. I wish we didn't have it ultimately. That would be a different world. But it's just a wonderful example that they've probably digested this internally, inside and out, top to bottom, bottom up, because it is a very aggressive, I don't mean it in a negative way, but it's a very aggressive marketing statement that needs to be digested all across the board. I believe, Boris, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah. Yeah, I want just to jump in here. I agree everything with Bianca, but just I wanted to just to add that I think it's not necessarily a bad decision to cash in on a trending hashtag or cause, but you need to be careful who is with you in that boat and what do you want to accomplish. Did competitors do the same? Do you want to be a shadow of your competitors? And
Right.
also you need to react fast and make decision to join the conversation while the topic is still on fire, of course, or you will just be a weird kid who is late on the party. So you need to be on
True.
time. Yeah.
I mean, actually, since we're talking about brands, we all look to brands for guidance on trends, style, a sense of community, and even guidance on some of these social causes. Boris, in your opinion, what is an example of a brand that properly takes part in brand activism, and what gravitates you to this particular brand? And let's actually just say your own brands cannot be the examples to make this a little
Uh,
interesting.
but one of the reasons why I'm working with Coca-Cola is because every idea about activism is welcome, at least for discussion. So it's natural for me to give examples from the company which I work for and from our
All
local
right.
market. Because to be honest, I know also other brands what did, but I cannot explain why and how. So if we talk about Coca-Cola as a brand, the campaign from this year, for example, filling the gap is one of the we are very proud on it. It's a campaign about gender pay gap situation in Serbia, which had the main goal of attracting attention on a very important issue and engaging people to talking about it. So how we did it? We made a pack of two 1 liter bottles, but one of them has 16% less Coke inside because women are paid less, around 16% in Serbia. And with a proper message, we sent to all stakeholders and influencers for the Women's Day on 8th of March. We also covered that cause with Instagram and Facebook just with one post, and also we have some PR coverage. But we start up the communication with our target audience and results was amazing, but it's but also the conclusion is that even we had a large engagement, the sentiment of the comments was mostly negative, as it was coming from the men who found themselves called out and who do not see this socio-economic problem as an issue. Therefore there is a lot of space for improvement, of course, in our society, and also like every individuals and the company should work on it. And for example, the only issue with this campaign was that coronavirus hit Serbia in the second week of the campaign. So we decided to put effort on and hold because there were more important questions for the society. As maybe you know, the moment we post all the campaigns for all brands and all marketing activities activities in order to direct all resources to helping hospitals and communities in different ways by supporting medical staff, donating food and drinks, and being there for consumers in some another different way. But also there is a couple of years, I think 2 years ago, another campaign for Rosa water, also a Coca-Cola brand, a local brand from Serbia. We call it Baby Choose Where. After doing a research, we got to the conclusion that mothers feel shame when they need to breastfeed their babies publicly, and they even get bad comments from the people on the street. So we decided to support mothers and explain to everybody that there is nothing strange in breastfeeding, that baby gets hungry as each one of us. We market benches and public places with stickers. We called cafes and restaurants to join the cause, and their response was very surprisingly positive. They put stickers on their doors and sent a clear message to all mothers and their babies. They are welcome to feed their babies publicly, and there is no room for shame in that. So I think that every brand have a chance to influence some negative habits and transform them into positive. It's just important to find the proper way for doing it.
Nice. You spoke about room for improvement. So, Ish, I'm curious, do you think brands should call themselves out when they're in the wrong?
Okay for companies to admit publicly, like when they do mess up, but depending on the severity of the issue, they should caution on like overdoing it. And to admit it, it's another thing for them to go on and develop a whole campaign and kind of take advantage of the situation. Then it becomes like a marketing. But I think depending on the severity of the issue, like I would adjust the strategy on how to outwardly it. So whether that's like an internal conversation with the CEO followed a letter from the CEO externally, like a press statement. It could be as simple as like a tweet. I've seen companies do that, and like it still like lands really well. I, I think it's expected that brands should call themselves out, but doing it too frequently also dilutes the brand and makes people take you seriously.
Yeah, and I'm also just conscious of the time. So, Sam and Social Day backend folks, could you just confirm if the counter I see is like when we have to wrap it up, or is that when the questions will start? So I can prioritize audience questions over the ones I have planned. So if you could just drop me a note in the chat, that would be wonderful. While I move on to the next question, so Boris, for you actually, companies get involved in activism, environmental. We just heard a couple of examples, but is there room for companies involved in political activism, as times are obviously very polarizing across the globe? So, you're sending, again, a clear message either way you go.
Yeah, that's a tough question, to be honest. But company is not a political party, that's clear. But we need to be aware that some companies, at least in Serbia, fund even political parties or some parts of their political programs for election just to ensure better positioning later when they need to negotiate about taxes, some market condition, etc., and hiding behind CSR projects. Of course, I don't approve that, and we can define that as a dark part of political activism. On another hand, some companies are involved in political activism with different intentions. For example, Twitter and Facebook are trying to stop fake political news, for example, by deleting President Trump's tweet, and we can say that they are political activists because they are defining the rules of communication on these global platforms. Also, we have brands which do it with purpose. We all know about Nike when in 2018 they call it Kaepernick, a former quarterback for San Francisco, as the face of the 3-decade anniversary Just Do It advertising campaign. So Colin just 2 years earlier took a knee to protest against the injustice, about racial injustice, when the U.S. national anthem played before the start of the game. So Kaepernick not only faced the public lashing out about his choice, but he's also ultimately lost his career. He sued the biggest Nike partner, NFL. I believe that they measured, of course, all the cost of this kind of political activism and decided to stand for an important cause and help sharing public opinion and potentially lead to long-lasting change. Do not forget that almost every consumer have a political opinion, so they expect from you to have a stand, but not by supporting political parties or political figures. They expect from you to correct political mistake and made by their leaders. Anyway, I think that companies need to be brave but careful, and they need to take care about their stakeholders. But I'm pretty sure that there is a room for political activism everywhere in the world at this moment, for sure.
All right, that's a strong opinion. Ish, do you think that companies without strong cultural values or purpose can be a leader in the brand activism space? Is that perhaps the first step towards finding your voice?
Yeah, and I have like two answers for this. So Boris mentioned something at the beginning of the talk about how like defining your brand purpose and knowing kind of like how to react for some of these things that are happening in the world. And I think that's super, super important, because the more of these like societal and political issues that are coming up, start seeing these companies that have nothing to do and never even believed in that issue start having it, like being a part of the conversation, and people do call them out and start to like say, like pull up old tweets basically, or pull up old messages or old Instagram posts and whatever that is, and then now you look like
Right.
you're like doing the marketing gimmick. You look like you're just like being a part of the conversation because you want your brand to be highlighted. But I think that there are some good examples, and the one that keeps coming top of mind for me is Ben and Jerry's. Like, they're an ice cream brand, and in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, they probably put out the best statement that I've seen in the past year. And that's considering like everything that's happened with the BLM movement, everything that's been all the crazy stuff that's happened in the world. They put out one of the clearest and most concise statements that outlined exactly where they stand, how they support the world, how they support the movement, what they were going to do, what they weren't going to do. And like every other company in the world, like if you look at this is the ice cream brand, but they understood where their cultural values lie, and everybody at the company, especially the digital marketing team, the social team, the brand team, knew how to present that information so that it was on brand while still like being a part of the conversation in the right way.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to take actually the final two questions we prepped for. We have 10 more minutes approximately, and I'm seeing some audience questions come through. So, Bianca, achieving real change will be difficult, sometimes even impossible on your own. So some brands will need to, partner up. It's likely that you'll need outside expertise here and go and partner with an NGO, activists, influencers. The sky's the limit. What do you think of collaboration as a strategy, and do you have any tips for our listeners to get started?
Yeah, definitely. I think collaboration as a strategy, to me, I personally love collaborating. It could be a small internal campaign or outward facing campaign, but collaboration is the key to any strong strategy. And like I mentioned earlier, from a personal perspective, working at VH1, we're always collaborating with other teams, whether it be social impact, digital brand, and I think that in itself helps us with strong strategies. In terms of these societal issues, if you want to collaborate with an activist or a nonprofit, to me, I think you can't go wrong, especially if it aligns with your brand. And similar to what Boris is saying, you have to understand your brand voice, your brand purpose, your goals before you can, collaborate with a nonprofit an activist, because if it doesn't make sense and it doesn't align, more than likely your audience is going to call you out on social. And you don't want to be that brand that's getting dragged for some collaboration that just doesn't make sense. But I think there's ways in which you can do it, whether it be like an IG takeover with the activist, or you're collaborating with a nonprofit to do a fundraiser to give funds to a particular org. I think there's multiple ways that you collaborate, but I personally don't see anything wrong with a collaborative sort of strategy. And on top of that, if you're collaborating with somebody strong and who has a really strong social presence, your reach is just going to double. So the impact that you're going to have and the message that you're trying to send out, it's going to hit markets and communities that you would never be able to do with just your brand voice. So I think it's really important, and I love collaborating.
Ish, did you want to chime in on this as well?
Yeah, so this is actually probably my favorite question from the entire talk. I agree 100% with what Bianca mentioned. Like collaborating is probably one of the best things that you can do, especially when collaborating with other people that are in the same position as you or like in the same realm. So when I was working at LinkedIn, I did social media for one of the biggest business lines at the company. And like when you're the only person that does your role, it can kind of be isolating because you can't really turn to anybody, So what I did is I turned to a lot of other social media leads at other social companies or at other companies that are in the similar space. Just to understand how do they dissect these problems, what is their process, better understanding like when they get certain messages on social, how do they respond so that I can kind of tweak it based on our brand messaging. And then even like when I was at Snap, collaborating with tons of organizations like Disability In, Human Rights Campaign, Techeria. Those are like external organizations that are thought leaders in the space that know exactly what how these problems affect the people that are in these categories or in these spaces. And then if that's like too much for companies because the company is too small or you don't have the financial support, there's always like internal employees. So look at the employee resource groups that you have, because these are the people that are living the day-to-day experiences and understanding their points of view and their experiences will help shape how the brand can be externally messaged.
Nice. So let's just, for the sake of time, go into audience questions. We covered a lot that I actually wanted to cover, so we'll see if we can circle back. So Charlotte is asking, how can brands show that they truly stand behind what they say they believe? And there, obviously, our answers discussed some strategies, but does anybody have a gut reaction tip here? How can you truly showcase that you're not just after the trending hashtag, but genuinely care?
Can I jump here?
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think
Anybody.
I think the brands need to keep that position like in activism all the time, not just to do it once and run away from it. You cannot run away from it, or at least your consumers will forgot that. So you need to keep delivering on your promises, and that builds the trust between the brand and the consumer, and that's only important. And only on that way you can success in this.
Yeah. This one's a little bit. Oh, did you, Bianca, want to say something?
Oh no, I agree with Boris. Like, I always say keep that same energy. If you're gonna put something out one time, don't just do it so it's performative. Like I mentioned, so many brands are getting dragged left and right because the audience or people on social just feels like it's performative activism. And that's the worst type of activism, in my opinion. So, if you're going to do it once, make sure that you somehow figure out how to incorporate
Right.
it into your strategies moving forward. Just so it feels authentic, keep the same energy.
Consistency is probably the key word that I think combines all of us here when it comes to marketers. Consistent copy, consistent tone of voice, consistent activism, fill in the blank. The next question is a little bit longer, so hear me out. Nidhi is asking, what are your thoughts for anyone on the panel on brands jumping in on the activism bandwagon for the sake of brand building and loyalty, while not living up to the specific message on business practice? This is obviously in no direct connection, at least I'm not seeing the context to anyone on the panel, because obviously that's a very sensitive topic matter. So if there's anybody who feels like they could chime in, like I guess alignment or misalignment in this case between desire and reality is what's being challenged. If anybody has an opinion, otherwise I can take it.
I think that
Silent.
you need to have.
Go ahead, Boris.
It's
ahead.
your.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's like if you have as of the company have been silent about a particular topic for a really long time, and out of nowhere you're just gonna want to join the conversation, that can come off as really, really fake. So it goes back to the topic we just said right now. It's consistency. Have you talked about this in the past? Have you actually done something about what you said you were gonna do in the past? Otherwise, people are gonna call you out on social, and you're gonna look 10 times worse than if you would have just stayed quiet. So just doing something, putting action behind every statement you do, I think is really important.
But also you need to have internal. Sorry, Dino. I also think that you need to have internal culture and values. If you don't have it as a company, you cannot do it. So people will recognize that, and they will know that you're lying, or they will not believe you. So you can make a big mistake with that. So at first, make some internal values, and I think that you can go in activism somehow.
Yeah. I actually was going to say, in connection to authenticity, if you're genuine about your response, I think the audience and the community and the industry is a lot more forgiving. I was actually asked in a similarly topic, a topic in our webinar about brand activism, what Falcon's diversity looks like. And I remember vividly at a trade show back in 2018, I was asked by a potential candidate who was looking to join the Falcon career development team this exact question. I was so caught off guard that I felt uncomfortable and aware of the fact that I'm not a PR specialist who kind of got a pre-digested version of this question, to the extent that I self-educated and really made sure that I'm ready for this type of question. Ultimately, what am I trying to say is, I think the audience will be forgiving if you say, listen, we're not perfect. Maybe our staff is diverse as we'd like it to be, but we're taking the second, we're pausing, we're trying to fix things, we're aware of it. I think awareness, if that's the direction you're going down, is not going to change immediately, but just being aware and wanting to change, to me at least, would be soothing enough if the brand I look to, I aspire to, I look to says a statement like that. I know it's perhaps not as easy in a Coca-Cola, in a Viacom, in a Cribbit. I don't know what your, PR and legal situations are like. So this is just me speaking from the heart, quite frankly. But I think that's also a great way to start, and the audience will not have an issue, in my opinion. Cool. So one more question, and then I think we're pretty much done. Flo is asking, it's a similar question, but how do you make sure the perceptions of your brand's inclusivity and equity are positive, and that it's portrayed true and genuine as opposed to jumping on a bandwagon? We discussed this, but is there anything specific you guys would like to highlight in terms of the inclusivity and equity? Perhaps what I just said is a starting point to answer this question, but anybody who wants to give some final words on the topic, feel free. This can be your conclusion.
Just wanted to say, don't run away from critics. Critics are a good thing, but try to explain your consumers why are you doing that, and probably they will respect you for that. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree with Boris. I feel like you not only. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Not only do you want to explain, but I think transparency, as transparent as you can be at these larger corporations, I think that goes a long way. Authenticity is key, being consistent is key, but also being transparent. Because if you, like Ish and Boris mentioned, everybody mentioned, like if you put out a post or a tweet one day and you've been silent on a particular issue for however long your company's been around, it just comes across so disingenuous and fake. So the least you can do is just be transparent and aware that, like, hey, we may not have a lot of diversity on our team, but we're aware of that and we're trying to do X, Y, and Z to move forward and better ourselves. We're not perfect and we're not robots. And I feel like a lot of people understand that now more than ever, especially, with COVID. Everybody understands there's a person behind that platform or that brand. So the least you could do is just be transparent with your audience.
Yeah. So after everything is said and done, I want to end this panel on one final question, kind of tying it back to the overall title, asking my panelists for their gut reaction, just a simple yes or no, or brand activism over brand neutrality. Do you recommend brands choose either activism or neutrality? So maybe we could start with you, Bianca, just gut reaction here.
I say brand activism all the way. You have a platform, you have a purpose, you have a reason. Use your voice to impact people, to educate, to be a resource. You don't have to choose a side, but use your voice for good. Use it for activism.
Nice. Ish, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think if brands and companies want to be taken seriously in today's day and age, I don't see how you can't. Depending on where your company stands, you can kind of like gauge how strong you want to go. But yeah, I say 100% yes.
And just one final word from Boris, yes or no?
Definitely brand activism.
Nice. Awesome. Well, with that being said, I want to thank everybody. If you have any questions for us, feel free to meet us at our virtual booth. And Stuart, back to you. Thanks for this wonderful conversation, guys. My pleasure.
Dino, excellent panel. Thank you so much for hosting that. And thank you, everybody, for being a part of it. I could have listened to that for another hour. So, thank you so much for giving the reviews. And Dino, we're definitely going to have to get you over here next year. I think you're wasted sat over in New York. We need you on the stage presenting, I think.
I would love that. I'm over this Zoom and digital stuff. I need handshaking and hugs. So please make that happen.
We'll do our best. Thank you guys so much. Massive round of applause for our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Bye.
I think you'd agree what an awesome panel, and actually some really difficult subjects there that the guys covered.